Welcome to episode 8 of Scorned by Muses, the Critic's Task.
If you become a cultural critic, you are signing off largely as an art critic. But an art critic hands down value judgments. And he hands down value judgments because he looks at art. And when you look at art and really look at it, you can't prevent yourself from having a value judgment. And you owe it to your public, your readership, to report your value judgments. And everything else flows from that. Thank you.
Even though I talk a lot about art, I don't really consider myself an art critic. I'm more of a frustrated artist who's found that his frustration with art is more of a frustration with society and politics.
We've seen a flood of material in the past few months tackling the issue of criticism and its relationship to the sorry state of contemporary art. Dean Kissick's piece in Harper's Magazine titled "The Painted Protest" inspired a flurry of responses where critics turned their faculties on one another in a debate over the role and efficacy of criticism in a time of aesthetic uncertainty. We'll hear more from Dean later in this episode. Last fall, Caesura Magazine hosted a panel titled "The Crisis of Art Criticism."
This is more of like a resurgence than it is a crisis. I think there's a crisis of art.
And at least two brand new publications that I'm aware of, Critics on Critics and Mutt Art Review, are set to launch in early 2025 with an attempt to reanimate art criticism from its long postmodern slumber. No doubt one of the figures who spurred this moment is Sean Tatol, whose Manhattan Art Review many saw as breathing fresh air into a discourse which had been suffocated by cryptic academic language and which had shirked the responsibility of actual criticism.
You have something you want to say?
Tatol's autodidactical dilettantism proved to be an asset insofar as he wasn't shackled by the chains of late 20th and early 21st century art discourse.
I mean, I guess I'm just, I'm pretty loose with it.
However, that same asset proved to be a profound liability because the ideological stakes of his arguments are extremely muddled. This ideological confusion is also why Tatol misapprehends my own criticism of him, which began with episode 1 of this series.
Sean has some serious shortcomings, and the main one is that he doesn't have a theory of history. So a few months ago, Tatol published this article called "Cornering the Critics," in which I am one of those critics that is cornered. And in this article, he kind of calls out the history or lack of history that some of these critics are bringing to their criticism, which is a little bit ironic because I had called out Tatol's own lack of a theory of history. So in this article, he says that a broad knowledge of the past is a necessary basis for navigating the present. And I agree with that, that's true, but the question is, how do we understand that past? In order to understand our past, we do need a theory of history. And a theory of history is not just a set of facts that lead up to the present. A theory of history is an explanation for why the past unfolded as it did. We could think of a physicist, for example, that for the physicist, history is the unfolding of the reactions to the original inciting incident of the universe, which would be the Big Bang. So the task for the physicist then would be to calculate those reactions in a way that's predictable and that helps to uncover the driving force of the universe. A Catholic theologian, on the other hand, might see history as the unfolding of the glory of God and the revelation of divine mysteries. The task for the theologian then would be to glorify God and to uncover the true nature of the divine. For the thinkers of the Enlightenment, who Tatol sees as outdated, history is the progress of the consciousness of freedom. And the whole idea of criticism is one which emerges with the Enlightenment. What is criticism? Criticism is to examine a phenomena, and through that examination, to discover within that phenomena the conditions for the possibility of change. How might one look at something as it is and imagine how it might be otherwise? I had texted Tatol because I wanted him to come on this episode, and when I explained this theory of history to him, he accused me of teleology. And I would say that's true. But I don't think that's a bad thing. Without a telos, without some idea of an end goal towards which we are supposed to be progressing, it's very difficult to even organize one's life at an individual level, much less at the total social level of society. So if we don't know where we're going, and if we don't have some idea towards which we are striving, then what the hell are we doing? On January 9th, 2025, Harper's Magazine hosted what was a hopelessly transparent ploy to boost subscriptions to the magazine. Dean Kissick, author of the Painted Protest article I mentioned earlier, sat down with the hosts of the Red Scare podcast for a discussion entitled Wither Contemporary Art. For those who haven't read Kissick's article, it's basically a complaint about how since 2016, woke politics has ruined contemporary art.
It's fair to say that Dean's essay about the state of contemporary art, featured on the cover of the December issue of Harper's, has for the past 2 months been the white-hot talk of the art world.
I found the talk to be mostly pretty boring, honestly, suffused with a mournful and regretful tone. Kissick and the Red Scare girls both rose to popularity during the early Trump years, when thumbing one's nose at the liberal orthodoxy of woke-mongers was enough to garner a substantial following of disaffected Bernie-crats and alt-weirdos.
You say the right didn't start the culture war. I think that's kind of true. The recent, like the one of the past 10 years or so, I think that's kind of true in my, I can use a very contemporary art, my lived experience, my lived experience suggested that it's really, this is a culture war coming from the left. But you do remember Trump's first election, which was very unexpected in 2016. This was something that Bannon would talk about all the time, and Andrew Breitbart, before he passed away, would talk about all the time, and would be like actively trying to foment. And Andrew Breitbart would say politics is downstream of culture, which I don't think is true, but he was saying it at the time. It really made sense to me, and they were really like, Bannon would say all the time, "This culture war is how we win." And perhaps with hindsight, that it seems proved right. I mean, it seems he seems vindicated.
On the one hand, Kissick expressed a nostalgia for the peak years of the culture wars, but also a regret that it might all have been for naught.
I'm kind of on my way out of the art world, at least, for a while. I feel like I go to these shows or I go to like lot of institutions, if I go to like gallery shows, and I feel like I don't like this. Like this makes me, I don't enjoy going to see these shows for the most part. I often find it depressing. It used to make me feel jealous, you know. I used to go, feel jealous of my friends. I think, wow, I have so many friends who are or more were like successful artists, and I'd be so jealous of like what they were doing. And now I just don't have that. I find it quite depressing, and I feel like this isn't for me, and it's not supposed to be for me. Well, and that's totally fine. Like art doesn't have to be for me. So if something's not for you, if you're not enjoying it, you should just walk away. And you can walk away, you know, gracefully, respectfully, and quietly, or you can just like issue a screed. You know, if you're a kind of, as I am, you're kind of like a slightly embittered millennial, and like, oh, maybe, you know, you spent so much of your life in art, and you think, maybe I made a big mistake.
One thing is clear. The culture wars seem to be drawing to a close. The response to the second Trump term has been muted. The hysterics of 2017 are much less apparent. Where will art go now that it no longer seems called to #resist? The critics have a harder job. It was pretty easy to dismiss the bad hysterics of the anti-Trump art of the past decade. Will we get a new and better art? What will that look like? I guess only time will tell. The art theorist Susan Buckmore said that the artist's job is to sustain the critical moment of aesthetic experience, and that the critic's job is to recognize it. My hope is that we can live up to that task.